Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Kari and today I am doing a Booktube Classics I have not read video. I saw Abby from Autumn of Pelennor do this and really liked the idea because I think it's just fun to look at the books that other people have read and that you see all the time on Booktube and compare yourself to the list that you come up with. So let's get into the books. The first one is Scythe by Neal Shusterman. This is a dystopian where humans have essentially defeated death and people called Scythes come around and kill you when it's your time. I honestly have no desire to read this whatsoever. I'm not overly keen on dystopians. I think for me there's a pretty fine line between a science fiction and a dystopian, and at this point in my life dystopians are too hopeless for me to want to read them. Also, it sounds very much so like Brave New World, and having read Brave New World, I'm good. The next one is an author as opposed to a specific book, and that is V.E. Schwab. She wrote Darker Shades of Magic, This Savage Song Duet, and Vicious Duet. Duology, sorry. I also have no real intention of reading her. All of her books are highly loved on Booktube, but they are not something that appeals to me. Her Vicious series is more so of a villain story, which sounds great, but not quite up my alley as far as the rest of it goes. This Savage Song I have not heard great things about. My friend Katie, whose tastes I very much so trust, read it when she was in Nicaragua and said it was disappointing and badly executed, so I have no intention of reading that. And Darker Shade of Magic, while it sounds interesting, there are more fantasies on my shelves that I want to read more, so if ever I get bored enough to pick it up, I will, but at this point I have no real intention. Number 3 is The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. This series I actually do want to read because the way it's been described is basically 4 kids searching for a dead Welsh king, and that sounds fascinating to me. I've not picked it up yet because I don't own it and I always forget to look for it in a bookstore or on thrift books or what have you. Also, I have so many more books that I do need to read before I get there, so at some point I am planning on reading The Raven Boys, but right now it's not a top priority. Next is anything by Rainbow Rowell. I think the one that comes to mind anyway is Fangirl, and this is honestly nothing I will ever read. I own 3, maybe 4 true contemporaries that are fluffy and chick flicky. I enjoy them on occasion, but if I'm gonna go for a chick flicky romance, I'm gonna go for a straight up romance with the smut and everything set in 1700s Scotland kind of a thing. I'm much more of a historical person than I am contemporary, and for that reason alone, I will not read anything by Rainbow Rowell. On that note, I also will never read Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda. I heard the movie was great, I hear the book is phenomenal, but it is a contemporary and I just don't care. Then there is Kristen Hanna, who wrote The Nightingale and The Great Alone. I have been recommended both of these books by people whose opinions I trust, and so I have no doubt that I would probably enjoy them. The Nightingale more than The Great Alone because The Great Alone it takes place in the 1970s if I remember correctly, and the 1970s just isn't my jam. Anything past about 1965, 1970 and I have to be really persuaded to read it. But I'm sure I would like both of them. It's another one of those, if I get bored, maybe I'll read The Nightingale. But at the moment I have other World War II books that I would like to read before that. Then there is Celeste Ng, who wrote Little Fires Everywhere and something else that I can't recall the title of. Her books just don't appeal to me. They have beautiful covers and I've heard that her writing is great and she's a fantastic author. She must be if she's a Booktube classic, but personally they just don't catch my attention because they are in settings and times specifically that I have no real interest in. Next is Brandon Sanderson, going back to authors as opposed to series or books. And Brandon Sanderson I do intend to read. I have his Way of Kings series here. I also have Mistborn somewhere on this shelf. But I haven't read them yet because, one, as far as Mistborn goes, I kept forgetting I had it. And as far as Way of Kings goes, it's just so very large that I kind of want to be able to dive in and finish the entire trilogy, which I couldn't do until I had the entire trilogy, which I now do, but at this point I have other books that I would like to read, so at some point this year I will be reading Sanderson. Next I have Illuminae, which maybe just scandalous to the rest of BookTube. This is written by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, and it is a science fiction YA with absolutely stunning covers. Takes place in outer space and follows different characters, if I'm correct, throughout the 3 different books. It is also written in various formats. So they have files, they have, I think, sticky notes, reports, that kind of stuff. And that is honestly the biggest drawback for me. I don't tend to look for, enjoy, or read things that are put in so many different formats. I prefer the straight up text, whether that be dialogue or paragraphs of description, I don't care, but I would much prefer that to trying to piece together all of it. The different formats, while it may work fantastically for some people, and it must because it's a well-beloved book, it takes me out of the story and makes me think too hard for it to actually be what I want. The last one is Laini Taylor. I can't remember the first one. Strange the Dreamer. Strange the Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares. I have no real intention of reading this duology, even if it is beautifully written, primarily because it just doesn't catch my attention. From the way I've heard it described, it's basically he has to go find out why this city lost its name. And that's great, that's lovely, I'm sure it's a fine book, but it's not something that makes me look at it and go, yes, I want to read it. So Strange the Dreamer is not something I have any intention of reading. I do really like the cover, and I'm sure she's a good writer, it's not me. So I'm not gonna read it unless I, like I said before, get really, really bored. Anyway, that is my BookTube Classics I have not read. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!